Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for our ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE webinar. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Sarah Scheinhorn. I'm an account executive here at ISG Solutions. So I'm going to do a brief introduction today, and then I'm going to turn the presentation over to Teresa Porco, who will demonstrate the ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE. Before I get started on like I said, it is a brief introduction, but before we get started, I'd like to just take care of a few housekeeping items. I have muted all the lines on the presentation today to cut down on some background noise. We would, however, very much welcome questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, you have two different options. If you look at the control panel for GoToWebinar, there's a little orange arrow probably at the right or top of your screen. If you click on that arrow, you can click to either raise your hand, and then at the end of the presentation, I will unmute your lines and you can ask your question. Or if you'd prefer, you can type your question in the question box at the bottom, and I'll read it for the group at the end of the presentation, and we'll answer that question. Again, we really welcome questions, so please feel free and don't be shy. So just a bit of very brief background information about how why we developed the Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE. We've been in business since 1995 and have been working with Advanced Solutions International and IMIS really since it was developed. We've worked with clients for many, many years on many different versions of IMIS, which includes the latest version, 2017. Most of our clients over the years have really relied heavily on Crystal Reports for a very long time, and they've made a great investment both with money and with time in Crystal Reports. So with the evolution of RiSE, many of our clients would like to access IMIS via the staff site, but since Crystal Reports don't render online, our clients are really struggling to find ways to replace their many critical reports either via IQA or SSRS. As the concern grew with our clients, at ISG, we put our heads together and really came up with a solution that we're very excited about, as you can see. And our certified IMIS extension developers have created the ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE. So as Teresa will show you in just a moment, it's really a simple and great way to view and run Crystal Reports from any RiSE site. And we did launch this just recently at the Dialog conference, Discovery Conference. So if you were at the Discovery Conference, you might have been able to stop by and see Teresa. And she's excited to show it to you, and we're all very excited. So just to quickly, there we go. Sorry about that. So just very quickly, as Teresa's going to show this to you in a minute, but really running a Crystal Report with through the ISG Crystal Report Viewer for RiSE is really very simple. It's really a three-step process. You upload your Crystal Reports through the administration iPart. You would then insert your Crystal Reports on any RiSE site. It's an iPart, so it can be put on any RiSE site. And then you can have fun and run your Crystal Reports. So really, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to turn this over to Teresa. All right. Let me see if I can hit the wrong button. Sorry. All right, Teresa. Hopefully, we can turn that over to you. There we go.
Okay, everyone, you should see my screen now. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Teresa Porco. I work with ISG Solutions and have for probably going on 15 years now. I have been very excited to work with the, one second, sorry about that. I have been very excited to work with the Crystal Viewer just because I have been one of those ones that are doing a lot of the development and getting these reports set up for our clients. I'm going to actually start this a little bit backwards. What I'm going to start with is showing you how easy it is to run a configured report. After we run them, then we'll go in and we'll take a look at some of the actual setup. So here is a public staff site or a public RiSE site, and I have a header right here. It's called Crystal Report Viewer. You can name this anything you would like. And below this, you will see that there are a series of reports that we have available to run. The first report is going to be the most simple. This is similar to when you go and run a report and it prompts for your, it pulls a list of your member types, counts, and things like that. So this is our sample of a Crystal report that has no parameters. You'll notice that here in this report, we have the options to print. We also have the options to export. If this was multiple pages, we could also enable the option to go from page to page to page to review. In the export options, you have all of the same export functionality that you have from the regular Crystal reports that you work with in IMIS. So you can do PDF, you can do Excel, you can do Word, you can do CSV, whatever you can do with Crystal reports in IMIS, you can now do through RiSE. In this next report, this report is another custom report, and you'll notice this now brought up my Crystal Viewer subsection because I'm actually in this section of the site. This report is prompting for a set of defined member types. When we get into the configuration, you have the ability to go through and predefine your different selection options. You have the ability to call IQA queries to be able to pass your predefined selection options into the report parameters. In this sample, these are actually codes and descriptions that I have predefined. So when you run this report, it will actually give you the chance to pick from these different ones. Select my option, select run. And here is my report. Again, this report, I can go through and I can print or I can export this report. In this instance, let's go ahead and export it to PDF. This report is looking at the standard name table, the address table, and it's also looking at the subscriptions table or the billing tab, depending on how you prefer to call it. So as you can see that this is the same kind of reports that you've used in your past, where you've got your custom logos, you've got your contact information, you've got your information from multiple sources all being fed into the report, and you can see how quickly that exported right into my output results. The next one I'm going to do is going to be an export to PDF. This one actually bypasses the export to the export file and goes straight to the export. It bypasses the download to screen and goes straight to the export. Here under member types, this one right here, this report is calling an IQA query. When the report is run, the query is actually passing a code, a member type code, to the report, but when your users try to run it, they don't necessarily know the codes, so they're seeing the descriptions of the member types, because your executive director is not going to know that associate member is actually code AM. So we want to make sure that even though the report needs the code, your users need the descriptions to be able to get their job done faster and easier. Export that report. Right now, it is actually generating the report. In this case, it's actually sending it directly out to the export file. For larger reports, this is a faster, more efficient way to get your information. So we didn't even have to preview this to screen. We know it's correct. And here, we can go right into our report. And here's our information for that different group based on that member type. Some of you, if you recall, personally I like to be able to run the reports to be able to export to Excel. So this right here is one of those ugly looking reports that goes through and dumps the information to Excel. This right here is looking for a list of event codes based on an IQA query. So I'm looking for all of my active events. And over here I have a secondary parameter that says, am I actually an active, am I registered or am I canceled? So you have the option to return them all or just the ones you need. And many of you will recognize this format because it's not pretty, but it can often be very useful for what we're trying to do. Since this one is not really a printer-friendly report, I do not have the option to print it, but I do have the option to export it to Excel or to come as separated values. So I go ahead and select the export, give it a second, and boom, there's my report. So they all work very quickly when going through the process. The next report I'm going to do, a few of our clients have some fairly particular needs in that they need to, one second. They need to be able to do what's called a stored procedure. they run a stored procedure from the reports. In this instance, I have a stored procedure that is actually going through, and I'm going to look at this IQA query, then I'm going to run the stored procedure, and then I'm going to run the IQA query again. So I'm going to do Smith. And the reason I'm doing this is this particular report is actually going through and changing the middle name of everybody with the name Smith. This is a very simple example, but again, a very effective way to be able to get information passed through from one point to the other. So this report calls a stored procedure that changes the member type based on the last name. My last name is Smith. Now my middle name is going to be Granny. I run this report. In the output, I'm going to get a note saying all of my new values are now Granny. When I go through and I find this query again, then all of my middle names have now been changed to Granny. So that is a sample of, you need to do, depending on your skill level. If you need to be able to run stored procedures through Crystal Reports, that functionality is now available through the RiSE site. The last report I have in the list is an old favorite. Many of you will recognize it. This report is, again, a simple report using an IQA query. It's looking for the ID, but we're actually passing for the users just the name. So it's really just a way to be able to generate this report quickly. The query is not necessarily important, but many of you will recognize the old faithful profile report that a lot of us have customized, developed, modified to be able to do everything that we need or generate all the output in one solid set. All that investment, all the time you've put into actually getting this report to do what you need, you now have it available through the RiSE site. I'm going to go back into here. So what we've done is we've taken a look at a sample or a series of reports that you can go in and configure here in the viewer. Now we're going to go into the viewer itself and step through how to go through and add a report. It's a very, very simple, this is the report manager. We're going to go into the plus sign, and that just simply means we're going to add the report. And this is going to be a webinar sample. So we're going to create the name of the report. That's what the users can see to make it most useful. Then we're going to create a code. And then we pick the category. This right here is simply driven by a lookup validation table. And then we're going to go in and pick our report. So in this case, we're going to go through and do event roster, select our report, and then click on upload. And now our report has now been loaded up to the RiSE site. Down here in the next section, here are our parameters. So there are different ways you can do this. You could actually go through and you can define your parameter. There are a series of parameter values that are embedded in the report, but oftentimes it's going to be your custom parameters. But if you wanted to use some of the defined parameter values, you could actually pass these from the report directly to the parameter value and be able to just complete the configuration there. For this sample, we're going to be going in and doing an advanced parameter. In the configuration window, we can see that this report is actually looking for the event code. We have a variety of import options. We have text, numeric, drop-down, multi-select, all the different options that you've had available in the past. If you wanted to go through and do a drop-down list, there are different ways you can actually define the drop-down list. You can go through and you can enter your own unique values. So for instance, I could say meeting 1, and then I would do a semicolon and call this, and then the pipe. So this right here, when it's actually passing the report, it's got the code, the description the user is seeing, and then that pipe means that you're now creating a second code. Sorry. So now I've got two different codes that are actually going to be passed when I run this report. But instead of me having to go in here and create these things over and over and over, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to an IQA source. My IQA source is predefined to go through and say, go ahead and show me all the active meetings. So it could be meeting with the begin date greater than or equal to today's date, however you want it to be. Here in the query, I can go through and select. It brings up my IQA queries, and here I have my event IQA query. And I know that this one, I've already created the query, or if I didn't have this query, then I could actually save the report as it is now, create the query, and then come back in and finish configuring this. Here in the key field, that's the field that the report is looking for. So I'm going to go through and say, okay, when you run the report wants the key event code, but my users want to see that title. And I can save this. And now I have actually completed the configuration for that specific parameter in the report. The second parameter is a simple yes and no parameter, much easier because we've only got a choice of two. We're going to again do a drop-down list. Our default value is going to be no, but here in our source list we can do no, pipe, and then yes. So now when I go through and I run this report, those are my two options when the include cancel option shows up. And here you've got areas like tooltips where you can go through and you could put a text value in there, and when users actually run the report, they can float their mouse over the drop-down list for include canceled. That tooltip will pop up and say, you know, this is what we expect you to enter when you're running this report. So there are a lot of features in here that actually help the users along in case they're not familiar or as comfortable with being able to run these reports. It makes it very useful to put them on the public site so that anybody who comes to your site now has the ability to run the same reports that your staff do or that you find that would be useful to them out in the world. Down here, we have additional dialog boxes. So if you want to have it, the report prompt, when it pops up and says, you know, run this report, pick whatever you'd like, then, you know, this is where you can actually go through and change the dialog box when you're running the report. Down here, I'm going to click on create. And I have just uploaded a brand new Crystal report called webinar into my RiSE, into my staff site. The next step is going to be going into the RiSE page builder section. We're going to have to create a content item to be able to call this report. So we're going to go in here, and it's going to default to my Crystal Viewer because this is where I hang out the most these days. New, website content, and we will call this one webinar. And publish file name webinar is fine. And I go into add content. This is where I go and I go into my custom and I pull up my report viewer iPart. Down here, it's going to be looking for the code that I assigned to the actual report. So I go into webinar. Another neat feature here is if I just type in the letter W, it will bring up a list of all the items that have that code. Next section, we simply decide, do we want to actually see it as a viewer report so it presents to screen? Do we want to default exporting to PDF, Word, Excel, HTML? You can actually pick this when you're configuring the report. Next, we have the option to enable the printing option. We have navigation that's going on, clicking from one page to the next, to the next, to the next. Then for export, there is the option to pick which export formats you'd like. Again, they're all the standard formats that come with the Crystal reports. So because this is a printed report, I will go ahead and select PDF and Word. I click OK and save and publish this. And now I have just created new website content that will run my report. So I click on the webinar, click on Run, and it's pulling up and it says, okay, what's your event code? And I go through and I say, this time, show me my canceled. And here is my report that I was able to, I thought I picked a different report. This is the export one, but that's okay. But this is the report where we could actually go through and print it. You can see that we can now jump to the next page, and on from there. The last step to make this available is to go into your site builder, go into Manage Sitemaps, and right now, instead of under Staff, we're going to go to our Member Responsive. Here's the Crystal Viewer reports that we've been working with so far. You can see that we have items 1 through 8. Click on New, Website Navigation Item. Simply call it whatever you'd like. Webinar. We pick our content to link to. There's our webinar contents. Save this. There is our new item. We'll publish our new item. And in just a few seconds, we'll be able to see it on this page. So we're back into our member home, and now we have our webinar report. So it's very, very simple. The reports are already developed. All you have to do is upload them and get them into the site. And then your staff can run them as needed. Sarah, that is it in a quick and dirty nutshell. If I can pass it back to you for questions and such.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Teresa. I appreciate that. I'm going to take it back and share my screen again one more time. Just a couple of wrap-up slides. All right. So obviously Teresa just did the real brains behind the presentation today, so thank you, Teresa. Really just a refresher. We really tried to design the Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE to be very simple. You can upload your Crystal Reports using the admin tool that Teresa showed you. You can insert the ISG Crystal Report Viewer iPart onto, as I mentioned, any RiSE site, so any staff site or member site that you'd like, and then you're able to run the reports. So hopefully you were able to see that it's pretty simple. Since we've launched the iPart already, the introductory price at this point for the ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE is only $275 per month, and it is now available for purchase. So really, if you have any questions, and I'm going to open up the line or check in a moment for any questions, but if you do have any questions that you think of after the fact or whatever the case, please feel free to reach out and contact me. My contact information is here on the screen, and we'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you may have. So let me open up here and see if we've got any questions first I'm going to see if there's any hands raised for questions. Okay, I don't see any hands raised, but let me check the question panel. All right, looks like we do have just a couple of questions. Fantastic. The first question, are the passwords, and Teresa, maybe you can answer this, are the passwords in the reports saved?
Okay, can you guys still hear me?
We can. I can.
Okay. So as far as the passwords, these reports function similar to the SSRS reports in that when you actually go through and you bring a report into RiSE, RiSE takes responsibility for the login and password values that are passed when the report is run. So everything is stored in RiSE. There is nothing saved in Crystal Reports. There is nothing exposed from the Crystal Reports. Everything is all going through RiSE, just like it does for the SSRS reports.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think so we're hosted. Are there any issues with being hosted? So go ahead if you want to answer that, or I can also.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say if you host IMIS either internally or you have IMIS hosted in a hosting facility, that is no problem. We are still testing it in the ASI cloud or IMIS cloud. Did you have anything to add to that?
No, that's accurate.
Thank you. And it looks like we have one last question. Does it work with Crystal 9? And the answer to that is yes. It works with Crystal 9 and higher.
That is correct. We have been told it will work with earlier versions, but as a rule, ISG has said let's stick with saying with Crystal 9 just because that's the most common version that's out there.
Great. Thank you. And then, one last question that just came in. If the report already has parameters, it will prompt you automatically. Is that correct?
When you upload the report into the staff site, the parameters are automatically read, and then it's waiting for you to configure them. So
Wonderful.
if the parameters exist in the report, and also if the report has subreport parameters, just like it would in any other process, if your subreport parameters are being passed to the main report and the main report is managing them, then it's managed the same way. We have a few instances where we have had a client that wanted to go through and create a series of subreports just on the same page. There was no main report, so each subreport passed its own parameters up to the main report. And what we would do for that is we would actually configure each subreport parameter to be responded to or to be answered when you run the report. So it can handle parameters from subreports directly, or it can handle parameters from subreports passed in the main report, and then the main report controls the parameter.
Wonderful. Thank you. And it looks like, I think that looks like all the questions we have. Let me just check one more time, see if there's any hands raised. And I don't see any, so wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Teresa, and thank you everybody on the phone for joining us as well this afternoon. We're very excited to present to you the ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE. So as you can tell, we're all pretty excited about it. So we really do appreciate your time. And again, thank you, Teresa. If you do have any questions that you think of after today's presentation, please do not hesitate to reach out and contact us. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.